What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Very Cold Lasagna, the podcast that houses a safe and open listening platform for all the casual, cold, and dumb takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports. I'm your host, DylanLasagna. Welcome to today's episode number 102 of this icy yet spicy podcast that houses that same old icy and spicy lasagna in that very cold fridge. And today, we got a big fat ass episode on our hands today because we are going to be looking at the 2022 NFL Draft. It is just in a very, very short time away. It is going to be happening on Thursday, April 28th. Yes, April 28th from April to April 30th, 2022. So in just a short amount of time, the NFL Draft is coming very soon. And I got to be honest with you, preparing for this took a very long time and also very demotivating time as well because, going into this NFL Draft, there wasn't honestly that much to look forward to in terms of who's the most exciting player to look at, who's the most exciting to look forward to compared to last year. Because let's be honest with you, I gotta say with this draft, it's mainly about, I guess, more about loading up rather than, who's going to be the next game-changing player on our team. This is, I gotta say, in my opinion, this draft is more about, just beefing up each team, per se, rather than, we're going to need to get a game-changing guy like let's say a Josh Allen or Jamar Chase or some other dude on the street. This draft, I don't know, doesn't like right now, as of right now, doesn't feel like it just yet. But here we are in just a short amount of time away from the 2022 NFL Draft. And it's a big fat ass episode. Why? Because what we're going to do this year, and compared to last year when I covered the NFL Draft, is remember last year when I talked about the prospects on one episode and I did my preview of the NFL Draft in another episode. Well, this year we're going to switch it up a bit. We're going to merge those two things together and put together one big fat ass filthy casual special shit-tacular preview of a draft, whatever you call it. It's a big filthy casual preview to the 2022 NFL Draft. There you go. So anyway, the NFL Draft is almost here, and it's going to be held in Las Vegas, the original site of where it was supposed to be in 2020 before that pandemic that's still kind of going on in 2022, but the original pandemic 2020 ruined everything. And we did at least get to see the memes of Roger Goodell manspreading and being in his house all weekend long in that 2020 draft. And when it comes to the first round, 24 of the 32 teams in the NFL are slated to pick in the first round. And a couple of teams have multiple first round picks, that being the Houston Texans, the New York Giants, the New York Jets, the Philadelphia Eagles, the New Orleans Saints, the Green Bay Packers, and the Kansas City Chiefs. They at least have 2 first round picks. And the teams that don't have a first round pick because of that are the Bears, the Broncos, the Browns, the Dolphins, the Colts, the Raiders, my 49ers, and the LA Rams. So unless if they decide to trade up into the first round with, depending on if any of those teams have a bevy of first round picks, then they don't have a first round pick going into day one of the draft. Now, as of this recording, at the time this recording is happening, this episode is being published, multiple teams, it's been floating around in the rumor mill that they're looking to trade down from their original spots, but it isn't specified where exactly, which teams are going to trade down. But again, draft day is always a moving piece to every puzzle. So what you see on pre-draft day, it's not always going to be the same. So for example, let's say, I don't know, the Detroit Lions are picking at number 2, but then when it comes to draft time, just moments before they pick, they're going to trade down with somebody else. So you have to expect the unexpected going into this NFL draft. And well, we especially certainly got that last year, but this year feels kind of a weak weak class all around, but hey, you still can expect the unexpected in general for the NFL draft. So before we get into the prospect portion of my big filthy casual preview, I do want to remind all of you, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see here on Very Cold Lasagna, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor FM, and Google Podcasts, and follow the show on social media on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna, because your support means the absolute world to me. Let's get started with our big fat ass filthy casual preview to the 2022 NFL Draft in Las Vegas. And we first start things off with our filthy look at the prospects that I picked in my scouting report. So I picked a bunch in like a little hat. Literally, I did, because honestly, again, I don't watch college football. I don't like know what I'm getting into. So I just picked some in the hat and I'm like, okay, here's the 12 people that I decided to pick. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't actually do that. But anyway, here are the 12 prospects that we're going to be looking at in this episode. So the first one I split them up into 4 categories and picked the 3 that I thought were most interesting to talk about. So we're starting at the edge rusher position, aka the exterior defensive line, and that we're going to start off with a Michigan prospect by the name of Aiden Hutchinson. Yes, that Aiden Hutchinson that has been hyped up by the media, hyped up by multiple NFL scouts. Yes, Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. And, you know, I guess I could kind of see why he's jumping off towards the top of the draft board, because, you know, he's a kind of a dynamic edge rusher. You know, he's pretty good when he's going off the edge. He's best when he's stopping the run, though, in my opinion, whether it's on the inside or on the jet sweep. And he does have a little bit of a variety when it comes to stopping the rush and not get penalized by doing so, unlike the other 2 pass rushers we're going to be talking about in today's show. And he has a lot of good hand movement too. You know, to get away from the grip of the offensive lineman, he violently swipes his hands, like, you know, kind of like waving his arms around to counteract something that kind of like a weakness that I will point out just soon enough. So Aiden Hutchinson, a pretty aggressive dude, in my opinion, and he gets to the quarterback fairly quickly. But here's the thing: he sometimes tends to be a little bull rushish rather than, you know, burst off the snap in a fluid motion. You know, have things come toward him and then, you know, try to knock away the defender and then get to the quarterback. So, you know, it's not like, you know, bull riding. You know, you can't just go head on and then expect to get the results. You know, with Aiden, you know, if he tries to bull rush in the NFL, quarterbacks are going to be, depending on the quarterback, but if it's like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, you know, they're very quick to react most of the time, and that can cause them, for example, to improv on the run, or at least for the offensive lines, like strong offensive lines, to quickly extinguish Aiden Hutchinson in order for the opposing offense to get a playoff in with like no hitch. His arms, yes, for as violent as his hands is, it's not very long. It's actually not very short either, but it's just like very medium length. But it can also limit how much he can shed opposing NFL linemen. So something to consider. He's also a decent like zone defender. So like, you know, he's when you're playing zone defense, when you kind of spread out, giving some space to the receivers. But Hutchinson not exactly the quickest to react in stopping receivers when it comes to the short passing game. So he's I guess you could say he's strictly a edge rusher pretty much. So my opinion, Hutchinson has a toughness, and he's pretty smart for an edge rusher that rebuilding NFL teams, the Jaguars, can ask for. Jacksonville. He's also a great player to have, in terms of maturity, energy, and effort. Jacksonville. Not the most high upside player that Jacksonville will probably get, but a player that could work out for Jacksonville, both on and off the field. Well, depending on if Doug Peterson or whoever the defensive coordinator is, they develop him right. So next up we have Kayvon Thibodeaux. I hope I pronounced that right. So with Thibodeaux, he's projected to go number 2 overall to the Detroit Lions, and I think I like Thibodeaux a little more than Hutchinson, just because I think he's a very speedy receiver that can get to the quarterback as soon as the ball gets in their hands. He's good both on the inside and out, and he's a pretty decent, like in the short running game or in the short passing game. He's pretty decent in cover defense. So he's a pretty efficient like edge rusher, and also a decent corner man. But here's the problem with Thibodeaux. He was flagged a big chunk in college because he would have a tendency to hold offensive linemen rather than hand fighting his way out of a block. Yeah, that won't work in the NFL. It'll actually get you penalized even a lot more because referees just love to throw that damn flag out. So for Thibodeaux, he also bull rushes, but not to the degree of Hutchinson. But that bull rushing ability of Thibodeaux, it comes up as a disadvantage when quarterbacks or running backs are able just to simply squeak by him. So Thibodeaux, like with Hutchinson, has to plan out how he's going to get to the quarterback in a more fluid manner. So for Thibodeaux, I like his speed. I like his poise as an edge rusher. He's probably going to be, again, the other top pick in the NFL draft going to the Detroit Lions. So for Thibodeaux, I think what he needs to work on once he gets to the Lions or whatever team he's going to, he's going to have to work on his actual technique, his actual planning to get to the quarterback. But, once that defensive staff, the Lions, that drafts him, that help him out in that area, I think he'll be a good, but I mean, we can't say great yet, but he'll be a good player in the long run. So we'll see how it goes there. So the last edge rusher we're going to be looking at is Trayvon Walker from Georgia. So I think I like Trayvon Walker. I mean, I know I said I like Thibodeaux, but I think Trayvon Walker is the best of the bunch in terms of the edge rushers in this class. He has the best overall body frame. He's got a good upper and lower body. He's a very disciplined player that can line up just about anywhere. He also has a long like arm length that helps him sway past opposing linemen, and he's very aggressive with his hands. And he can really, really get to the quarterback in a big way. He hits him hard, man. He really hits him hard. The thing that's kind of like concerning about Walker is that raw athleticism doesn't always equal execution, because he was often beat by quarterbacks, and as a run defender, he kind of like waits around before going after the running back. And yeah, like in the NFL, you have to like be quick. You have to have a quick decision to do I go after the running back or do I have someone else do it? But you got to make that quick decision really quick. Anyway, he also hasn't played in many games, so he doesn't have much starting experience. And even if he's starting a game, his snap count wasn't much. So you have to wonder, like, can he play a mostly full game? You have to wonder about that. So for Thibodeaux, I like most of his pass rushing tangibles. But for a guy like Walker, he has the athleticism to be a good, if not great, pass rusher if he can work on his own pass rushing tangibles himself. If that team that drafts him helps him develop on those skills, especially when it comes to the execution in his assignments, getting to the quarterback, not just bull rushing onto the offensive lineman, then Walker can be a force to be reckoned with in the NFL. So those are the edge rushers. Now let's get to the corners, because with edge rushers and corners, honestly, when I was looking at these two positions, they were pretty good. They were pretty good positions for such a overall weak draft class. But still, the defense is apparently the theme of this year's draft, and compared to last year, where offense was the name of the game, defense is running wild, man. So let's look at the cornerback position and take a look at Ahmad Sarsgana. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because my voice, I'm trying to get through allergy season and I'm still recovering, but bear with me. So anyway, we're taking a look at Cincinnati's Ahmad Gardner. So I think Gardner is clearly, I think I can agree with everyone, whether it's in the media or anyone on YouTube, the sus is legit. I gotta say it. He is the strongest corner in this class. He has the strongest football IQ. He is the most physical. He also has a lot of good mental awareness, and that's also balanced by his physical traits of quick speed, tall height. And what I like most about him is that he kind of like predicts like what's going to happen. Like he kind of knows what's going to happen, and he'll either break up the play or like completely blank the opposing receiver that quarterbacks won't throw towards the sus. The thing I didn't like about Ahmad Gardner though is that he is not exactly the best tackler for a corner his size. I mean, he's tall, but he's kind of like a slim guy. He can also mistime his angles and get trucked by receivers if he's not in the right position. And I like that he can go downfield. I like how he can zing down the field one-on-one with the receiver, but he can also struggle at times moving from one direction to another when the opposition runs past his way. So for Gardner Johnson, who's that? Sorry, my names are getting mixed up here today. So for Ahmad Gardner, I think his weaknesses can continue to be worked on with more playing time in the NFL. The sus is one of the best and one of the safest bets in the draft. I think his field smarts, his high upside, is just about what any secondary can ask for, especially for a guy that looks like he's going to be a lockdown corner on opposing receivers. So, I mean, it's still early to predict that, but he has the high upside potential to do that. So next up we have LSU's Derek Stingley Jr. So he initially looked like he was going to be the top guy in the NFL draft in the cornerback group, but he had some issues with injuries in his later college career. So I guess we could start off with that point with highlighting his weaknesses before we get to his strong suits. So he had a great freshman year in LSU, but again, his biggest weakness was staying healthy through his college career. He played through a leg injury in 2020 during that pandemic year, and then missed a large portion of 2021 last year with a foot injury. So, I mean, it's probably going to hurt you even more in the NFL, but when you're going from college to the NFL, lost times means less tape for, the NFL scouts or, general managers to look at your position, see how you did in college and see how that could translate into the pros. Also, when it comes to strengths, I think he fits very well in pretty much any scheme, whether he's a shadow corner or in like zone spread out. He's also a good disruptor in the running game. He like can detect when the running back is gonna where they're gonna go and like what's gonna happen pre-snap and post-snap. He's also a good tackler in the open field. He displays patience in coverage. He also has some good ball tackling and vision skills as well. So for Derek Stingley, not the most strong corner of the draft class. He could have been the top one had it not been for his injury issues. But again, he makes up for a couple of his weaknesses that I didn't mention already, but a bunch of people did. He has good mental toughness, strong football IQ, especially in coverage. You know, he has good patience, quick reads, and he's also able to keep up downfield and control receivers well with, you know, proper hand swiveling, you know, not getting too grabby with the wide receivers to cause the pass interference. But again, the big thing is for Stingley is whether or not he's going to get drafted to a team, like whether it's in the first round or in the second round. He has to prove to whatever team he's on, he eventually gets drafted to, prove to their team doctors that, well, he can stay healthy. It's plain and simple. So our last corner that we're going to be looking at in our filthy casual scouting report is Kaiir Elam from Florida. And this was the most interesting one. I mean, sure, we've talked about very briefly a couple others, not a couple others, just two others. Stingley just recently, and then we also talked about the Ahmad Gardner. But when I watched like clips and looked at Kaiir Elam, he started off hot, and then he had a bad year in 2021. So I wondered what happened. I really wondered what happened with him. What caused that regression? Like, and it was like not like it was a slight regression. It was kind of like not like super significant, but like kind of big regression. So what I liked about Kaiir is that he has crazy fast speed. He was just like running like the Flash, running like freaking Naruto, running all over the field. He was able to keep it downfield, even against the fastest of receivers in college. And that made him like such a really good shadow corner, following receivers route to route before he could make his move with the ball. And when the receivers got the ball, he could wrap around the tackler to the ground to make sure that, well, opposing receivers wouldn't push him around in hand-to-hand combat. And when it comes to, you know, his physical form, his size, he has a good physique. And when it comes to his mental football IQ, good awareness, patience, and coverage. And who knows? Like maybe that's what he needs. That's what he needs more in the NFL. But here's the thing: in his last two seasons at Florida, he was pretty bad with his fundamentals, especially with basic tackling. So yeah, it's kind of like almost every NFL corner, not named Jalen Ramsey, J.C. Jackson, or the other top tier NFL corners, who don't do basic tackling, who just like, we like, oops, we missed him. Oh, I let him slip by, and then he's off to the races. Touchdown, Mr. Receiver. So looking at Kaiir Elam, he missed a lot of tackles. He did pretty bad with basic tackling. So if he wants to be at least a good corner, not like a total shutdown corner, but be the shadow corner that he was in the years that he was good in Florida, he's gonna have to play with more confidence. And you know, I guess he couldn't trust himself that much in those two seasons that he was bad, but he has to trust himself to whatever team he's gonna get drafted to. He also tended to panic when he faced receivers with just as much speed as him in 2021. He either was grabbed and penalized for pass interference, or he whiffed on his tackles, or he just completely got outright beat. So again, it might be just a confidence issue, but again, whatever team he gets drafted to, he's going to have to work on those basics in training camp. So Elam, very interesting situation with him. I think he could be a good shutdown corner. He possesses a lot of good athletic and mental upside that defensive coordinators are looking for. But the thing is, he just has to polish up the basics, especially with his tackling, because if you look at his tackling in 2021, it was pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But nonetheless, I think he'll be a key addition to whichever team drafts him. And again, as long as he works on those basics in training camp and in games, then he can be a key part in a secondary soon enough. So now we're done with the defensive side of the ball. Let's now shift our focus to the offensive side of the ball in this draft. Now, I do want to say that unlike with the defensive side, the offensive side is kind of lacking, but in certain areas. And we're only going to talk about receiver and quarterback in this filthy casual preview. So let's talk about receiver. So starting off is Christian Watson from North Dakota State. Trey Lance's old school. And I think Watson is, I think it's the second best receiver in this class, because I like his explosiveness from the snap for such a big size receiver. His route running, mostly good. But again, he can develop it. He can develop on varying his route running, because when it comes to his route running, he mostly just runs in a straight line, and he doesn't really do much to branch out from the snap. So he can work on that in the pros, develop to vary up his routes. He also has some good hands, whether it's in the middle or in the vertical catching game. He can go up, grab that pass, or go up in the air and haul it in. He has very, very good hands. Some of the downsides of him, though, is that his big size also tends to reduce his movement, just to get away from the defensive back. Only so slightly, though. So his footwork does need some work if he doesn't want to delay his timing with whoever's going to be his quarterback, in terms of like gain to his spot. And if he doesn't get to his spot in time, it could create a turnover. So he also didn't face like a lot of competition, I imagine, since he came from school in a division in North Dakota State. So that talent gap probably is going to come into question, and how's that going to translate to the NFL? So for Christian Watson, I like his talent. He possesses a lot of athleticism, and he creates a lot of yards after the catch, and he makes a lot of crazy plays. I think he just needs to work on being more than just a straight line receiver. If the right team drafts him and they help him work on that, in due time, he could be a big time threat in whatever offense he's in. Now let's take a look at Alabama's Jameson Williams. What I liked about Jameson Williams is that he's like an explosive receiver with great speed, and unlike Christian Watson, he has a lot of variety to throw off defenders, especially with his route running and finding different ways to not grab the ball necessarily like Odell Beckham style, but to throw defenders off in such a way that they can't catch him. And he also has some good ball control after the catch. So he ain't letting that ball go. Some of the things I didn't like about Jameson Williams is that he's sometimes indecisive on where to go. And if he doesn't know where to go, it could throw off his timing on his spot, and he can either drop the ball or not be there at all. There's also the thing of when he was in the national championship, he tore his ACL. So scouts haven't really seen what he looked like other than what they have on film. He didn't even go to the scouting combine in February. So kind of a red flag for general managers, kind of, but not really, depending on how they look at it. So for Jameson Williams, he is a receiver with top flight speed, bringing a big variety in his route running, and possesses good ball control, all of which help him and his team create tons of positive plays. But again, that big thing is gonna be his health. Is he gonna be healthy to go I imagine at least halfway into the NFL season because of his ACL injury. Because yeah, it's going to be a big question mark for NFL teams. Should we draft this high in the draft? Let's say round 1. Should we draft this person in round 1? This, like, he has high upside, but is it worth the risk? Because is it worth getting a guy coming off an ACL tear? Is it worth this risk? That's something that they have to address. Kind of an under the radar prospect is a guy by the name of Calvin Austin III from Memphis. So an interesting thing about Calvin Austin, he's pretty small. He's pretty undersized, but behind that small stature is his speed. He is a pretty damn fast receiver that can beat corners. That could be just as fast as him, but he can beat them. If they try to get too close in coverage, he's gone. He is just, see ya, bye. And he shows off his toughness with tight window catches, and he's a good blocker. He's kind of a good blocker. He is pretty physical. But yes, his short stature also can be a curse too. In the NFL, it can make him very vulnerable to injuries, especially against very physical corners like Jalen Ramsey, or who's another physical corner that's out there. I don't know. So anyway, he is also kind of loose with his route running before and after the catch. So what I mean by loose is like, oh, I could go this way, I could go that way. So if he's pretty loose with his route running, like, corners can kind of know where he's going. So he has to be a little more unpredictable with his routes. So for Calvin Austin, I don't imagine him being a top option in an NFL offense yet, if ever. But again, the small size presents physicality and speed that can't be understated. I imagine him being a day 2 pick, and maybe being a second or third option in an NFL offense, because he'll be a good outside mid-range threat. But again, I think what sets him back a little bit is that his size could get him hurt. It could lead to some injuries in the NFL. So I like Calvin Austin, but I'm worried about his long-term viability. So going to the quarterback position to end our filthy casual portion, scouting wise, in this episode, and we ended off with quarterback. Now, quarterback is certainly the weakest bunch of the NFL draft class in 2022, and we're gonna get into good reason why. And I say this is the weakest class because a lot of these quarterbacks don't look like they're ready to go. They're like, not at all. At least with last year, you had guys like Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence to a degree. You had at least 2 people that looked like they were pro ready, and guys like Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields. They needed like at least a half year or a year to prep themselves for the starting role. But 2022, you don't see that. Like, I don't see, in my opinion, my very, very casual opinion on these quarterbacks is that I don't see like anything promising yet. Like, not yet, at least. I don't see anything promising. I don't see starter appeal in most of these quarterbacks. And I only see at least one. And I only see at least one quarterback I'm going to be talking about here in just a bit. But with that being said, let's talk about this 3 quarterbacks that we're going to be talking about. The first one that we're going to be talking about is from Liberty by the name of Malik Willis. And he is rising up the draft board for whatever reason. And I kind of don't understand why. Because with Malik Willis, he's kind of like a pet project. He really is. I mean, I like his arm strength. He has very good arm strength. That means he can sling the ball from pretty much all ranges. And he can really throw in really awkward situations, whether it's rain or in tight angles, in whatever, in the toilet. He could throw it in just about any like any situation that you can imagine him. He also has a nice deep ball to him as well. Again, going back to that arm strength. And he's just as much of a threat with his legs. You see him run around in the pocket and running out of it because he couldn't find anybody. But here's the thing. He runs out of the pocket so much because he doesn't have great pocket awareness. If you watch his highlights in 2021, he is pretty bad in the pocket. He often improvises in the pocket. He like just stands there, and then 2 seconds later, he's off running for his life, like in past the line of scrimmage, and he gains a couple of yards or he gets a touchdown untouched. So he often improvises, even if it's a clean pocket. He just runs. He just runs. Like, I don't know why. I don't think that's such a good idea, such a good mindset to develop him in, because that kind of erratic behavior is going to get you punished in the NFL, where it's going to be a big hit or a sack or maybe even an injury. That's what concerns me about Malik Willis. And he also has a hard time, like, when it comes to anticipating an open man downfield, like on their routes or like anything in regards to that, because he'll just yeet the ball to like whoever's open. Like, they wouldn't let it doesn't matter if they were finishing their routes. He just yeets the ball. He just yeets it. Like, oh, so somebody's got to be open. Fuck it. So with Malik Willis, he's kind of like a pet project. He kind of is, because Malik has all these physical tools. He is very, I can see he's very passionate about the game, but he needs a lot of development. He needs time to work on his pocket awareness and work on his decision making if he wants to have a chance to succeed in the NFL. Now, I don't know who can draft him, and I hope to God that he goes to the right team, that the right team falls into to his lap, not like a team like the Carolina Panthers or anything, or any other shitty organization like that, because they're not going to develop him correctly. But whoever that team is, they need to seriously develop him, because he needs to work on those tangibles. He really does. So our next quarterback on our list is from Pittsburgh, Kenny Pickett, Mr. Small Hands. Yes, literally, that is the running gag on this guy, Mr. Small Hands, because he literally has the hands that is kind of like 1/4 the size, or maybe even more. That's not as big as mine. Maybe mine's even smaller than his. I don't know. What are we running here? Conspiracy theory camp here? I don't know. So that's kind of been the running gag for Kenny Pickett's path to the draft. He has small hands, and I can understand that it causes him to fumble the ball a lot. And honestly, yeah, it could be a big detriment on how he could truly run the offense in the NFL and how he could truly throw the ball in an NFL offense. Because if his hand doesn't like fit the football all the way in, it could either lead to a slip of the ball like too early, or he can't throw the deep ball. But that deep ball deep ball theory kind of like contradicts what I just said, because Pickett, for a person of his size, for a person that has a small hand, he's actually an accurate multi-range passer. He can throw it at all three ranges. But he's really at his best when he throws outside of the pocket, and that's when defenses really second guess him. But besides the small hands thing, he often tends to stay out of the pocket too long trying to find someone. And that results in him taking a lot of unnecessary sacks. Like, once you're out of the pocket, or whether you're in or out of the pocket, you have to get rid of that ball. You have to find somebody. Not like Malik Willis style, like, oh, somebody's got to be down there, fuck it. Like anticipate the receiver's done with their route, and then get it open, let it rip. That's what Kenny Pickett should be doing. So Pickett, a Heisman finalist in 2021, he looks like a pretty solid dude. I think he has solid pocket awareness. He knows when to leave the pocket if the pressure starts to collapse on him. I think he has to develop an understanding between not just staying in that pocket, but going out of it. Because again, just like with pretty much all these quarterbacks nowadays, erratic out of pocket plays can lead to trouble, lead to turnovers. And I do think those small hands, I mean, I what is it? Like a hand fetish? What is Dan Snyder? I think those small hands can lead it into trouble with fumbling more often than we thought it did in college. Especially, you know, how vicious NFL pass rushes are. And that, I don't know, it could quickly lead, if Pickett is put in a team where they expect him to start right away, that screams trouble. That really screams trouble, because I don't see him being a starter right away, because yes, he's a average sized dude, but he has pretty small hands, and he can throw the ball at all three ranges with pretty good accuracy, but it's just the long-term viability. So I don't know if it could scream first round for Kenny Pickett. So we'll see what happens with him. But what I can scream first rounder for, and who I think at least seems most pro ready, is Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. Now I thought his actual name was pronounced Ryder, you know, Desmond Ryder. But I don't know. There's a double D in his last name. So anyway, Desmond Ridder, clearly the most experienced quarterback I've talked about out of the bunch here today. He has a proven track record of a 44-6 college record. He appeared in the college football playoff and has a multiple college bowl game appearances. So how much has he won how much of those he's won exactly, I'm not sure, but clearly indicated by his 44-6 record, probably a lot of them. But again, your college success doesn't always translate to the NFL. So just saying. But when it comes to his physical tangibles, I like his pocket movement. He's clearly a pocket quarterback. That's where he's most efficient at. His arm strength is solid in the short and intermediate passing game. So clearly his pocket passing game a big plus. But he's also just as efficient in outside of the pocket as well. He's able to process plays quickly and again get out of the pocket if the O-line starts to break down. I think the biggest weakness for Ridder, though, is his deep ball, because not only are they inaccurate, but it can lead to some bad interceptions, which are big no-nos in the NFL, because once you throw an interception, that could change the game for your opponent very quickly. So for Ridder, I mean, that's the only thing I can knock on him is deep ball. He looks the most pro ready out of the QBs I discussed, because in Cincinnati, he played in a mostly pro style offense, and he has a good pocket awareness. He varies up his play calls, so it shows you that he went and studied the playbook like a lot. He's also a good dual threat playmaker with good speed, but again, he prefers to be a pocket quarterback unless things start to break down. So he just tries to run out of it. But he has to work on trying to limit the unnecessary throws early in games. But I mean, that's kind of normal for quarterbacks when they start the game, especially if it's like a slow start. But he has to limit those still. So with Ridder, some things to work on, especially when it comes to his early decision making and his deep ball range. But I think he at least looks ready to go from the jump if he's drafted by the right team and the right coach. And honest to God, though, there's only very few teams that have that right team culture and that right coach, unfortunately. So those are your prospects. Those are your 12 prospects that I at least tried to scout for this episode. So who do you think is going number one? Who out of all these 12 prospects do you think is going to succeed or maybe bust in the NFL after this draft? Let me know how you feel. Let's start a conversation. Send me a DM. Leave a comment on YouTube. However you want to address me. Let's start a discussion when it comes to these draft prospects. I mean, the draft is a short time away. We still have some time to discuss it and our filthy casual opinions. So now that we talked about the prospects that I scouted and told you guys about, let's now look at the actual draft itself. Round 1 of the 2022 NFL draft. Each team, well, at least 24 to 32 teams are going to be picking in round 1. Now, as I go through this little preview of sorts through this first round, I'm going to be talking about what each team needs, and they're kind of seasoned in a nutshell in 2021. But if you want to watch my in-depth season recap of sorts, then I highly recommend you check that out. But in this particular preview of sorts, we're going to be talking about what exactly each team needs to address in the draft, like how many picks they have. That's pretty much how it's going to roll from here on out. So kicking things off again for the second year in a row is the all-elite Jacksonville Jaguars with their elite 3-14 record from 2021. And yeah, pretty much is because, well, the Urban Meyer experience was a total failure. It left a lot of unanswered questions regarding their first overall pick from last year, Trevor Lawrence, and, well, a lot of gaping holes around that roster that Trent Baalke still hasn't addressed. Some of their current big free agents included Christian Kirk from the Arizona Cardinals, Brandon Sheriff from the Washington Commanders, and Arden Key from the San Francisco 49ers. So I guess you could see them as solid key additions, but they overpaid for a couple of them. Christian Kirk. So for the Jaguars, they have the most amount of picks alongside the Kansas City Chiefs with 12. They have 12 picks in this draft, including the number 1 overall pick. But just because you have a good amount of picks doesn't mean most of the time that you execute on all those picks. I think last year they also had the most amount of picks and they botched a good amount of them. So for the Jaguars, obviously, I think the most obvious pick for them is going to be Aiden Hutchinson at number 1, which is their top need, is an edge rusher. But from there, you're going to need a whole lot of other things as well. You're going to need another wide receiver because Christian Kirk is not going to be your number 1. You need another offensive tackle. You need a linebacker. You pretty much need help all around Trevor Lawrence and a defense that was pretty shitty last year. So for the Jaguars, you have 12 picks. For once, Trent Baalke, please utilize them well. And for the con men, the Con, Shaheed, and Tony Khan man, please stop being cheap. You spend all that money in AEW. Stop being cheap. For once, spend on your draft picks. Next, we have the Detroit Lions, who went 3-13-1, but as I mentioned in my season recap, it was kind of like an optimistic season for them. You had a little bit of an optimistic future towards them. Even with the crappy roster, their season pretty much went just as expected, but Dan Campbell is a pretty no-nonsense coach, and he pretty much is the right coach to lead the rebuild. He gets the most out of his players. They play hard for him. Sure, they don't have the quarterback yet, and I don't think they're going to get the one that they want this year, but if they get some pieces to get for that eventual quarterback, then they can win a couple more games. Not like, oh, we're going to win 9 games in 2022, but just continue to build the foundation in Detroit and then get that quarterback in 2023. So they have about 7 picks, including number 2. They need an edge rusher. They need a safety. They need a linebacker. They need a wide receiver. So for the Lions, this is their first of 2 picks. One near the top of the draft and one at the very back end of the draft at number 32. But we'll get to number 32, their other pick, later on. But for this pick, it's obviously, well, who knows? anything could change. But for now, in my opinion, it's obviously going to be the other edge rusher, either Thibodeau or Walker. So it's either going to be one of those guys. I'd be surprised if it was a corner. It really would. If it was going to be one of the top corners. So they're going to pick one of the top edge rushers if it's not Aiden Hutchinson, whatever is not Aiden Hutchinson. And then after that, they're going to focus on filling up the back end of their defense. So they have to address that. They have to address the defense because they gave up way too many points, way too many plays. There just weren't enough quality assets at pretty much every position in that defense. So that's what Detroit has to do. And we're going to go back to discussing them 30 picks later in this preview. Next up, we have the Houston Texans, and they went forward 13 in 2021. And it was kind of a miracle that they went that way, and they matched their win total from 2020 because, Davis Mills, their Stanford quarterback, was kind of a solid surprise. I say solid, but he's not like spectacular or anything. But he was a solid asset in a pretty shitty team under the head coach of David Culley, who unfortunately didn't get any lovey from the organization as they move forward with their new head coach, Lovie Smith. So the Texans actually didn't have a lot of picks this year before they finally shipped off Deshaun Watson in that big mega deal a couple weeks ago with the Cleveland Browns. So they now have 9 picks, including number 13, just 10 picks later in this draft. So they got Cleveland's 13th overall pick in this year's draft. So when it comes to this pick in round 1, it can go either way. I gotta be honest with you. They do need a lot. The Texans are a big rebuilding team. They need a lot of things. And it's possible, just like with the teams with multiple first round picks, like literally just not even like well apart of each other. It's possible that the Texans could fill their top 2 needs well within the first round. I think their 3rd overall pick is probably going to be the other remaining edge rusher, whether it be like Trayvon Walker or Kayvon Thibodeau, or maybe Ahmad Gardner, like the top corner, or maybe they get in the top offensive tackle. Maybe a little too high, but anything can happen. But for the Texans, maybe getting an edge rusher alongside the other one, Jonathan Greenard, it would definitely help. But it doesn't also hurt to go after Ahmad Gardner, drafting him to give the Texans secondary a big boost. So either an edge rusher or a corner won't hurt them in this spot. It's just a matter of, is drafting a corner or an offensive tackle too high for them. So next up, we have the New York Jets. And again, another team with multiple first round picks. They went 4-13 as well. Mostly bad for Gang Green in 2021, but late in the season, Zach Wilson showed a little bit of promise, having finally settled into the playbook, and he did pretty solid. Now it's on for the Jets to build around Wilson, give him some help. I think they gave him an offensive line in free agency, like some, but not filling up all the spots. So they have to continue to build that foundation in the draft. No, he already had a solid offensive line, but it doesn't hurt to add more. But anyway, so the Jets have 8 picks in this draft, including this one, number 4. They also have number 10 from the Jamal Adams trade from Seattle. So their top needs are an edge rusher, corner, linebacker, free safety. Now, just like the Texans, the Jets have an opportunity to fill their top 2 needs already in the top 10, mind you, if they do it correctly. Now, it's just a matter of what do they address first. That's the thing. They have like options here. They kind of have options. They can go for edge rusher. They do need one to pair with the Carl Lawson But if the Texans don't get a corner, they don't get a corner, and Ahmad Gardner is right there, then the Jets can go ahead and take him because they need a defender that Gardner create a lot of turnovers, but he is a crazy playmaker. They have other needs in the top 10 as well, but again, we'll address that when they get there, when we talk about them. Next, we have the New York Giants, 4-13 as well. Both the New York teams were pretty bad, by the way. The Giants suffered through many injuries. That's the story of their season. And even with all the injuries, the offense was horrible with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. Yes, Saquon Barkley even had a down year. Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman were shown the door. And in came the new GM head coaching duo of Joe Shorin and Bill's offensive coordinator, Brian Dabble. So it's pretty much Daniel Jones' last chance to prove that he deserves to be the starter in New York. I don't foresee a situation where the Giants pick up his fifth-year option. Like, I think the deadline is next week. So I don't see this organization, unless they're that stupid, to pick up his fifth-year option. Like, it's either he has to prove it or he's gone. Unless, again, if the Giants are that stupid to pick up his fifth-year option. So the Giants, they have a lot of needs. They actually need a lot here. So fortunately for the Giants, they're picking just, I guess you could say basically back-to-back. Because they have 8 picks. They have the 7th overall pick from the Chicago Bears in that Justin Fields trade. So the Giants are a pretty talent deficient team. They need a lot. They especially need an offensive tackle to protect Daniel Jones. They need an edge rusher to solidify that pass rush. And they just need a lot. But I think the main goal of this 5th overall pick is getting Daniel Jones some damn protection. Getting a tackle that can protect him and give Daniel Jones a true chance, like actually at least trying to prove something in his 4th year. But we'll get to the other needs when we get there. And, well, one pick after this. The Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers at number 6, 5-12. They started 3-0, but they went on to prove completely that their 3-0 start to the season was just a total fluke. They wanted to lose the next 2 of 12, and yeah, I don't understand how Matt Rule still has a job. I really don't. So the Panthers, I actually forgot how many picks they have. I didn't note that down, but they have at least a solid amount of picks. I don't remember, but anyway, when it comes to their draft needs, I think the biggest question mark is their quarterback. Do they go for a quarterback this early in the draft? Do they go for something else? I think I guess you can't really go forward with the draft without addressing the most pressing question in Carolina, and that's the quarterback position. And in my mind, they're really stupid. Matt Rule and that organization is really stupid to think that going into 2022 with Sam Darnold as their starter, or let alone even Baker Mayfield, if they trade for Baker Mayfield, is a good idea. But again, is there really a better option? I mean, really, like Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garbage Fail. Is there any better option out there? So who knows? Maybe Carolina goes all in on a guy like Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett, but Matt Rule better make sure that either one of those guys pans out. Better make sure that one of those panned out. So for Carolina, when it comes to their other draft needs, they have to fill up the offensive line. They allowed way too many sacks in 2021, and they did get some additions in guard Austin Corbett and center Bradley Bozeman, but they need a quality left tackle. Maybe they can get one here if their decision is not quarterback. And they also have to find replacements for linebacker Hassan Reddick and Stephon Gilmore after they lost them in free agency. So for the Panthers, a lot of things for them to consider. So back to the New York Giants at number 7. This is the pick that they got last year when the Bears traded up to get Justin Fields at number 11. So for the Giants at number 7, at this point, just literally just 2 picks later, it's whatever the most pressing need is, unless if they want to trade down from this pick. So for the Giants, they can either use this pick or the original pick to net a premium pass rusher to pair with Azeez Ojulari in hopes that they finally generate a pass rush of sorts in 2022. And then in the later rounds, you could go on and address, well, pretty much just about everything else. Finding a linebacker, finding a wide receiver, a number 1 wide receiver, because Kenny Golladay certainly ain't it. He ain't living up to that contract. And maybe a running back that can stay healthy, because Saquon Barkley hasn't done it since forever. So moving on to the Atlanta Falcons, they went 7-10, and I gotta say, I'm pretty surprised that they even, like, sure, they had a losing record, but 7 wins, what the hell? They kind of overachieved with the pretty shit roster full of short-term contract players, and they were in playoff contention by week 15. But then they were shown their place. They were exposed with their shit roster, and they were eliminated. But still, at least there were at least some encouraging signs that under first-year head coach, damn, I forgot his name, but it was the former Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator. But unfortunately, they shipped off Matt Ryan to the Indianapolis Colts, and they brought in Marcus Mariota. So, yeah, it from a shitty situation to a very shitty situation, a very, very shitty situation. But they do have 8 picks this year in the draft, but what's not to say that they're competent to nail on those picks. But for the Falcons, it's tricky. Do you want to draft a quarterback when you already have Marcus Mariota as a potential stopgap? Do you want to wait for at least a year, or do you want to just go out there and bolt now and get one? It's going to be an interesting decision to make. But in my opinion, wide receiver should be their first option, because while they lost a key contributor in Russell Gage in free agency in the division, mind you, and Calvin Ridley, whether he was going to be back or not, well, you don't have that option anymore because he got suspended back in February for gambling. Yeah. So another thing on the Falcons' to-do list in this draft is they have to find a productive edge rusher after losing Dante Fowler to the Dallas Cowboys in free agency, and building up that interior offensive line, because the offensive line for Matt Ryan in 2021 was dog shit. So that was the Atlanta Falcons at number 8. At number 9, we have the Seahawks. Yes, Seahawks originally didn't have a draft pick in 2021, but a Russell Wilson trade did. A Russell Wilson trade caused that to happen. So for Seattle, their annual playoff hopes completely crushed when Wilson injured his throwing finger and was pretty much never the same after that. And like I said a million times, the Hawks finally traded him to a team that he looked like he wanted to go to in the Denver Broncos, and their spot that they hold now. So for Seattle, they have about 7 picks to, at least try to rebuild. Even though Pete Carroll vehemently denying that they're in a rebuild situation, but they're in a rebuild situation regardless. And I think when I just talked about other teams that have to talk about the elephant in the room with the quarterback position, Seattle is the absolute team. Like, they are the absolute team that cannot address anything else in the draft without poking at the quarterback position. Because yes, the prospects that I talked about when it came to the quarterback group are not great, except for, I guess, Desmond Ridder, but that's just me being nice. But you can't go into 2022 with Drew Lock or Geno Smith as your starting options, them competing for the starting role. You just can't. But then at the same time, the options in this year's draft are like honestly no safe bet either. So you kind of have to roll the dice and eat a slice, because, well, neither of your options here are great. So I guess for Seattle, you have to take a quarterback here. You have to take your chances with a Desmond Ridder or Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis. You have to try something. But whoever that quarterback is, whoever's going to be quarterback, they need pass protection, and lots of it, because, well, do you want to see that new quarterback leave as well, like Russell Wilson did? Want to see them complain about the lack of protection like Russell Wilson did? Do ya? So anyway, the Seattle Seahawks also need some help in the secondary by looking at corner again, because they gave up a shit ton of points again in 2021. So that's Seattle for you. The New York Jets, back to them at number 10, rounding out the top 10. At this point, it's whatever they need to fill that they did at number 4. And they have plenty of options here. It's just a matter of picking the right player, what's deemed to them as the right fit. In my mind, picking a wide receiver at number 10 wouldn't be so bad for them, because Zach Wilson also needs some help, because, you know, they have a receiver group of Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, and Braxton Berrios, and those 3 guys are not going to be enough to be productive for Zach Wilson's growth in 2022. So next up, we have the Washington Commanders, and I apologize if I'm drinking a lot of water. It's just my throat is killing me. I'm still trying to recover from spring allergy season, and I'm just the latest victim of it. But anyway, the Washington Commanders at 7-10, going into their first draft under their new name. Before they were the Washington Commanders, the then football team in 2021, they were pretty much enduring injuries and disappointment from a bunch of players at key positions. Taylor Heineke was a kind of so-so player, quarterback during this time, and then during the offseason, they went out and traded for Carson Wentz. Yeah, they went out and they literally gave a shit ton of picks for the quarterback that kicked their ass in the NFC East back in the day. Yeah. So anyway, for the Washington Commanders, they have 5 picks, including this one, and they don't have a lot to address what they need. So they're gonna have to address their big needs right away. And the first thing they have to address is the receiver position. And Carson Wentz can't have a situation like he did in Indianapolis, where he only had one dependable receiver in Michael Pittman, or in this case, Terry McLaurin, and everyone else is just on the wayside. So they have to use that number 11th pick to get a wide receiver opposite Terry McLaurin, so Carson Wentz has some options to throw to. Other than that, the Commanders should go out and about in addressing the interior offensive line and attacking the guard spots, so Carson Wentz in the interior can be protected so he has time to throw. So for Washington, it's a matter of addressing the offense. 2022. Next up at number 12 is the Minnesota Vikings. They went 8-9, barely missing out on the playoffs, and they looked okay. They looked okay in the past season, but the defense and Mike Zimmer proved that it wasn't Kirk Cousins' fault most of the time, because they let down big time, giving up a lot of big plays. Mike Zimmer not coaching them to a big stop, and Mike Zimmer got fired, and in came in this offensive coordinator from the LA Rams. So for the Minnesota Vikings, they have 7 picks, including this one this year. And I think the top needs that they need is, well, defense. I think you get the point. So we can talk about how Kirk Cousins needs this, Kirk Cousins needs that, but I think Kirk Cousins pretty much has what he needs. Like, He has Adam Thielen. He has Justin Jefferson. I guess he could certainly use tight end, but what Kirk Cousins need is a defense that can back him up. Because in 2021, that defense undid pretty much the hard work, most of the hard work that year for him that he built up, and Mike Zimmer was fired as a result. Mike Zimmer is supposed to be a defensive coach, and well, he knew shit. So for the Vikings at least, they got Zadarius Smith, the linebacker from the Packers in free agency, so they stole him away. But they still need to prioritize the safety and corner positions. Xavier Woods, not the WWE Xavier Woods, he left in free agency, and Patrick Peterson is not getting any younger. So this pick right here could be corner. It could also be safety, but either way, they could choose from either one because it's still early in the draft. It's still pretty loaded with defensive talent, so you can't go wrong with either one if you're Minnesota. Now, going back to the Texans at number 13, when they got this pick from the Cleveland Browns, they have to focus on their second biggest need here. Their second biggest need is wide receiver, because Brandon Cooks is their only reliable receiver on the roster, and having a guy like Nico Collins isn't going to cut it. Davis Mills needs another downfield option. He needs another person opposite of Brandon Cooks to throw to. Mills also needs pass protection, which can be addressed in day 2. And general manager Nick Caserio, well, he could just find the best available tackle, hopefully, in round 2 or maybe in day 3 of the draft. Next up at number 14, we have the Baltimore Ravens at 8-9. This is kind of a letdown season for Baltimore because injury mania ran wild in Baltimore. What you gonna do, brother? And it eventually, took its toll on the Ravens in due time because, they were actually leading the division, the AFC North, by November. And then all of a sudden, they suffered a lot of key injuries in December. They lost some big games that month. And then by the end of it, they were on a 6-game losing streak. And they just were eliminated just like that. So fortunately for the Ravens, they have 9 picks, including this one. Actually 10, including this one. So for the Ravens, it's a little bit of mix. It's a little bit of mix of what they need. They need a center. They need a corner. They need a defensive tackle. But which one do you address here? The Ravens' top priority in this draft is getting a premium corner and adding depth to that position because, well, not only the fact that you gave up so many points, you gave up so many yards in 2021, but you saw guys like Anthony Averett, Tavon Young leave in free agency, and Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey are coming back from major injuries in 2021. So the Ravens have to address the corner position, add some depth to that position. And the Ravens also have to go address the offensive line. That was probably one of the worst in the league in 2021. And also got worse with their center, Bradley Bozeman, leaving. So two major things that they have to address in this draft. But I think the thing that they have to address in number 14 is probably the corner spot. And then just add some depth in the later rounds. Now, here's where things get a little weird. A little weird at these next couple of picks. Because I think it was like a couple weeks ago in the world of the NFL where the Philadelphia Eagles and the New Orleans Saints decide to, you know what? Let's swap picks with each other. Let's swap picks with each other. I'll give you my pick, and then you can have my pick, and then you just give me a first round pick for next year. So this is pretty much where things get really weird. So at number 15, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know how they got this pick from the Miami Dolphins for whatever reason, but they have it. But anyway, the Philadelphia Eagles went 9-8. They actually exceeded expectations. They made it to the playoffs with a run-centered offense, but that run-centered offense went nowhere in a total beatdown by the Tampa Bay Bucs in the NFC wildcard game. So for the Philadelphia Eagles, they have 10 picks, including this one here at number 15. And for Jalen Hurts to truly succeed, he needs another wide receiver. He also needs an offensive line. The Eagles could pretty much get either one of those in their 2 picks in this draft, in round 1. So which one could they go for? Like they need a wide receiver opposite Devontae Smith, because Jalen Reagor ain't gonna do it. They also need an offensive lineman to solidify that front. They also need a corner to go opposite Darius Slay, because he isn't getting any younger. They also lost Steven Nelson, but it remains to be seen. So either way, Philly has some things to address in this in this draft. So the pick here, I don't know. It's really tricky, because a lot of needs for Philadelphia, but it could go either way. So next up at number 16 is the New Orleans Saints. They got this pick from the Indianapolis Colts from Philadelphia. And the Philadelphia originally had this pick because, well, it was a conditional second-round pick that turned into a first-round pick from the Carson Wentz deal that they did. The New Orleans Saints, they actually had a solid start to the season with Jameis Winston, but then he tore his ACL against the Bucs, and things pretty much derailed from there. They saw their off-season, their season past that point pretty much derail. It pretty much derailed from there. They almost got into the playoffs, but then of course the Niners won. So Saints, even if they made the playoffs, would have gotten smashed with either Trevor Siemian or Taysom Hill at quarterback. But this last offseason saw Jameis Winston signed to a cap-friendly deal. But they also saw longtime head coach Sean Payne step down from his duties as head coach and was succeeded by defensive coordinator Dennis Allen. So for the Saints, it's kind of a new era in New Orleans. You have 7 picks besides this one, including this one. But you have a lot of key needs that you need to fill. For the Saints, you need, I guess you could say that you should be using your 7 picks in like pairs. What I mean by that, you need 2 wide receivers, 2 offensive tackles, 2 safeties, and then I guess you can use 1 on either one, because they need depth at those positions. Because the biggest priority for the Saints in this draft is getting a receiver opposite Michael Thomas, or even to replace Michael Thomas, because you don't know how he's going to turn out when he comes back. I don't think he's played in almost 2 years. Has he not played in almost 2 years? Correct me if I'm wrong in that. But either way, it's been at least a year since Michael Thomas hasn't played in the NFL because of an injury. And the Saints' other options at wide receiver are pretty unreliable ones. So for New Orleans, they have to tackle this receiver spot, because do you really think Jameis Winston wants to throw to people that are pretty unreliable? Really? So anyway, moving on to the next team, the LA Chargers. The LA Chargers, oh man, it was a fun season for them. That was a fun season to talk about them. Yeah, the Chargers looked great in 2021 for at least a quarter of the season. And then the back half of the season came, and that saw a very poor defensive play, a COVID outbreak late in the season, and then a bad timeout call in the final regular season game in overtime. And that caused them to waste Justin Herbert's significant progression in year 2 and miss the playoffs yet again. So good job to the LA Clippers. So for the other Los Angeles team, they have 10 picks besides this one, including this one. So they have to use them efficiently, because they have some pressing needs to address. On the right side of the offensive line, they need another wide receiver. They could use an edge rusher to pair with, or add some depth to, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and a running back behind Austin Eckler. The Chargers did a great job last year in the draft, addressing the other side of the offensive line, the left side, by getting Rashawn Slater. But now they have to address the right side, because in order for Herbert to be fully protected, they have to give him the offensive. They have to give him blindside protection. So for LA, filling up that right side of the line with the guard spot and the tackle, I think that's the most pressing need that they do at number 17. And then in the later rounds, maybe they find a running back behind Austin Eckler. They add some depth pieces for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. So for LA, it's if they want to get back to the playoffs, or let alone reach the AFC Championship game, adding some depth pieces, and especially going out and retooling that right side of the offensive line is a must. It's an absolute must. In the back half of the NFL draft, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, who are picking again, if their second pick in the draft. And, at this point, 3 picks later, it depends on what they want to do. They have plenty of picks to address their needs. Like I mentioned earlier, they need a wide receiver to go alongside with Devontae Smith. They could also use another offensive lineman, another defensive tackle, alongside Fletcher Cox. But in my mind, maybe here would be the spot where they shouldn't pass up on not getting a receiver for Devontae Smith. Going up number 19, we have the New Orleans Saints once again, and at this point, they need a tackle or probably a safety, because, well, maybe by this point they haven't drafted their emergency glass plan for Michael Thomas. But whatever they do, they definitely need, either way, their former tackle, Teron Armstead's replacement. They'll definitely need a replacement for him, because their current offensive lineman group, led by James Hurst, it's so-so. But would you really want to have a downgrade of an offensive line under Jameis Winston? But anyway, you can either go for an offensive tackle or safety, but in my mind, you should try to build your offense with getting a wide receiver and a tackle with your first 2 picks in the draft. Going into the final 12 in the first round of the draft, taking a look at what these teams need, is the Pittsburgh Steelers, going 9-7-1 in Ben Roethlisberger's final season. It's pretty much as you expected. Washed as all fuck, but JJ Watt and that Pittsburgh defense did enough to carry that washed offense for one last playoff appearance, even if it was a blowout, for Big Ben Roethlisberger, finally riding off into the sunset in retirement after the season was over. And in the free agency period, they got none other than the MVP, the original MVP himself, Mitch Trubisky, in free agency. So for the Steelers, I know some people will say that they need a long-term quarterback. They don't believe their MVP is going to be the MVP for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think Mitch Trubisky should be their stopgap option, because, like I said, I think it was like the Carolina Panthers, and I think it was the New Orleans Saints. The Steelers shouldn't try to go all in. They shouldn't try to risk going after one of these quarterback prospects. I mean, maybe they try to take a chance on Desmond Ridder if he's available, but nonetheless, just ride it out with Mitch Trubisky. Wait it out until 2023. Who knows if the quarterback class will be good by then? But Mitch Trubisky is not all that terrible. I mean, you can Mitch the terrible, but not completely terrible. But the Steelers should be focusing on, getting Trubisky another receiver in between Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. And, you could also grab in the later rounds, getting another corner to go opposite of Levi Wallace, along with the other depth corners in that position group. So for the Steelers, your main focus should be on getting a receiver alongside Chase Claypool, who has yet to step up, and getting some help at corner. Now, number 21, the New England Patriots, who went 10-7, or was it 11-6 with the Buffalo Bills, but they lost the AFC East. But anyway, I digress. For the Patriots, solid year with Mac Jones in his first year in the NFL, and pretty solid. But that once dominant defense in the midseason fell apart down the stretch, and especially in embarrassing fashion to the Buffalo Bills in that AFC wildcard game. Yeah, that was an absolutely terrible way to end the season for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. So the Patriots now have to regroup and try to hopefully get younger at several positions, because for the Patriots, they were pretty old. They were pretty old people in 2021. So either way, not only do you have to get younger, they have to retool key positions, especially at corner and wide receiver, because they lost a lot of quality starters in free agency, like J.C. Jackson on defense. They also traded away Shaq Mason to Tom Brady's old new team, the Tampa Bay Bucs. So you need some help on the offensive line. So New England should mainly consider drafting a corner, even if it's this late in the first round, to offset the loss of J.C. Jackson, because yes, you got Malcolm Butler back, but is he really going to net you the results that he once did back in the 2010s? Probably not. So New England could use some help with receiver as well, because Kendrick Bourne is Mac Jones' only reliable option so far. And remember when they went on that free agency spending period back in last offseason, when they spent on guys like Nelson Aguilar and all those other receivers? I forgot what his name was. What the other tight end? Hunter Henry. I guess you could say he was a disappointment. And their other draft pick from a couple of years ago, Jacoby Myers, they've done next to nothing to prove that they earned their contracts back from last offseason, at least for most of the free agent signings from last offseason. So they need a kind of like a downfield receiver for Mac Jones, and maybe another tight end. So at number 22, it's the first of two picks for the Green Bay Packers. And this one, the Packers got from the Las Vegas Raiders in that big Davante Adams trade. And can the Packers just draft a damn wide receiver, please? Because their entire season in a nutshell pretty much is exclamated by the fact that Aaron Rodgers wasting another season, another MVP season, because, well, he just didn't show up for when the game mattered most. In the playoff game, in another playoff game that against a very mediocre, I guess you could say very mid 49ers team, even with a strong defense, they were mid as fuck on offense, but then they managed to completely choke it away, get stuffed in that very cold fridge, eating that ice cold lasagna, alongside Matt LaFleur, more like Matt LaFluke, fucking things up too with a special teams disaster piece in an embarrassing NFC divisional game loss. Yeah. So the Packers, with all the picks that they have, 10 picks, actually 11 for that matter, they have plenty of picks to go out, get a bunch of receivers, get the entire offensive line and its shit together, go and retool the defensive line. They need help at nearly half of the positions because you extended Aaron Rodgers again. But you also traded away Davante Adams because apparently he just needed a change of scenery, and you also couldn't afford to pay him. So here at number 22, you absolutely have to find his replacement. You have to draft a receiver, not go out and get some random linebacker, or go and get out Jordan Love's replacement. Get a receiver that Aaron Rodgers can absolutely trust and develop a connection with over the next several years until he freaking retires or something. As for the other needs, we'll address them when we get to the Packers' actual pick in the first round. At number 23, up next, we have the Arizona Cardinals. For Arizona, it was another typical season for Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. 7-0 start, but then they choked late in the season, and as a result, got blown out by their division rival and eventual Super Bowl champion LA Rams. Now, for the Cardinals, not many picks this time around, and they have a couple things to address. They have to address edge rusher, wide receiver, defensive line, tackle. And so far in free agency, they've yet to address those losses, especially when it comes to edge rusher Chandler Jones and Jordan Phillips in free agency. And on the receiver end, they still have DeAndre Hopkins. They still have Rondale Moore, their second-year receiver. And they just re-signed A.J. Green, but, A.J. Green is on the wrong side of 30, the wrong side of his 30s. Rondale Moore hasn't yet proven to be at least in the conversation of wide receiver 3 or 2, for that matter. So for Arizona, they need help. They need to find replacements for Chandler Jones and Jordan Phillips. They need to find at least a wide receiver 3 because they lost Christian Kirk too in free agency, and they've yet to see what they have in Rondale Moore. So if Kyler Murray is gonna demand an extension for Arizona, or at least a fat new contract, or Arizona's gonna exercise their 5th-year option on him, make him work for it. Make him, or at least surround him with talent. At number 24, we have the Dallas Cowboys, and yeah, they're in this position because, well, they Cowboys their way into this spot. It's probably their most successful season in 2021 since the 2016 season. Dak Prescott did relatively well for the most part in his return from that gruesome leg injury in 2020. Cowboys once again won the terrible NFC East, but then you pretty much disappear in that NFC wildcard game against the 49ers. But hey, Dak still won the MVP, right? He got the torch passed from the original MVP in Mitch Trubisky. But anyway, the Cowboys have about 8 picks in this NFL draft, and they really need some help on the offensive end. Their defense is okay. I mean, everyone's still locked in for the most part, except for Randy Gregory, who decided to, at the last moment, jump ship to the Denver Broncos. So I don't think Randy Gregory's going to be that too big of a loss for the Cowboys because, they still have DeMarcus Lawrence holding up that front, and, Michael Parsons is still there. But what they need help most is the offensive line, because they lost a lot of people on the offensive line, the receiver portion. They only have Dalton Schultz to the franchise tag, so they need help. They need serious help, and this is what they get for completely shitting the bed in the playoffs, because you have this roster. You have this roster that you can win a Super Bowl with. Yes, I'm crazy for saying that, but you have this opportunity to go out, shock the world, win a Super Bowl for your crazy rabid fans that are just like Sasha Banks fans, but on a mega level portion. But you didn't get it done, and now you're reaping the consequences of it. You lose Cedric Wilson in free agency. You lose your one of your best tackles in Lyle Collins, and also your Pro Bowl guard in Connor Williams, both in free agency. And then you go and trade away Amari Cooper to the Cleveland Browns. You send them to literally the ultimate punishment in the NFL. So they need to completely revamp this offensive line. They need to pretty much fill up almost every spot in the offensive line, and that starts with the 24th pick. You can use about almost half of those picks to fill up that offensive line, and then from there, maybe find a receiver on day 2 in round 2 or 3, because I don't know. You have to see how CeeDee Lamb will do without Michael Gallup and Cedric Wilson. Can he step up in that number 1 role? Because Michael Gallup is still going to be recovering from that torn ACL, and well, who else do you have? Who else do you really have in Dallas for Dak Prescott to throw to? So at number 25, we have the Buffalo Bills, and man, I really feel bad for Josh Allen. He had a really great season in 2021, but unfortunately, his top-ranked defense let him down when it mattered most. Yes, Josh Allen had a really great game in that AFC divisional game against the Kansas City Chiefs, but the defense couldn't stop him. They couldn't stop him, and here we go. We had that rule change this past month, no, back in March, and because of that, and well, if had they played defense, we would have seen an AFC title game in Buffalo instead of Kansas City against the Cincinnati Bengals. But anyway, the Bills mainly have to address defense in this draft. They have about 7-8 picks in this draft starting here. The Bills mainly do have to address the corner spot because they do get Tre'Davious White back from the ACL tear, but when do they get him back is the question. And they won't get permanently back Levi Wallace, their other starter opposite of Tre'Davious White, because he's now with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So corner is going to be the absolute thing that they have to address first, because you don't know when you're getting Tre'Davious White back. Levi Wallace is now a Steeler, so perhaps that's the first two picks that you make on day one in round 2 as well. So some other things that they need to get is finding another guard, maybe as depth for the Bills, and maybe a more consistent running back, because I don't like Devin Singletary or Zach Moss in that rotation. And hopefully they find a gem in late in day 2 or day 3, because we don't want to see Josh Allen like running around for we wouldn't mind it, but it doesn't do wonders for him long term. So next up we have the Tennessee Titans at number 26. They had the top seed in the AFC in 2021. Even without Derrick Henry in the second half of the season, they just barely squeaked by Kansas City for the top seed in the AFC. And they got Derrick Henry back for the divisional game against the Cincinnati Bengals. But unfortunately, the Kings return in that game, along with the 9-sack attack by their defense on Joe Burrow. It was just completely undone by Ryan Tannehill, their quarterback, because he threw 3 game-changing interceptions in that game, including one that set up Cincinnati in field goal range, and they went on to lose that game. So, no AFC title game for the Tennessee Titans in probably their best chance yet. So now they have to go out and figure out what the fuck we're going to do. And what are we going to do to rectify that problem? Well, you try to figure it out in the draft with, 7 picks. 7 picks in this draft. And it starts at number 26. Now for the Titans, you have to revamp certain positions on the offensive line, because you didn't re-sign veterans like David Quesenberry, and you released Pro Bowl guard Roger Saffold, and now he's on at the Buffalo Bills. And you have some in-house options, but none of them have starting experience, and in the rotation they're so. They also need a lot of receiver help, and I mean a lot, because you release Julio Jones at that 1-year disappointment of an experiment. AJ Brown, who's eligible for a contract extension, he could potentially hold out. I'm not saying he will, but it could be like not like a Deebo Samuel situation, like, oh, I want to trade out of Tennessee. But you never know, because these players are greedy as fuck nowadays. So AJ Brown, you never know what can happen with him, because he's eligible for a contract extension, and if the Titans and him don't get done, maybe some crazy things can happen. So the Titans did get Robert Woods in a very middling deal, and tight end Austin Hooper in the offseason, but I mean, it's going to take more than that to give Tannehill some help opposite of AJ Brown. So they need a tackle, a guard, some revamping on the offensive line, and another wide receiver or two to give Tannehill some options other than AJ Brown next season. So then we have the Tampa Bay Bucs at number 27, who were just this close to getting back to the Super Bowl. Actually, this close in another game. So Tom Brady had another career year, continuing to defy Father Time at age, 44 during 2021. But unfortunately, late in the season, they had key injuries and whatever Antonio Brown went through. And in the playoffs as well, they had some key injuries on the offensive line. And that prevented the Tampa Bay Bucs, even with that crazy comeback against the LA Rams, it just wasn't enough. Just wasn't enough as they surrendered that crown to the eventual new champs, the Rams, in the NFC divisional game. So for the Bucs, they don't have many picks. They only have 6 picks in this draft. But fortunately for them, not too many things to resolve. They do have Tom Brady back from retirement. Yes, retirement in air quotes. So they need to use this draft to pretty much just give him as much help as he possibly can. They have Shaq Mason from Brady's old team to replace right guard Alex Kappa, who's staying retired. Oh no, it's Ali Marpet that's staying retired. So Alex Kappa went off in free agency. But here's the thing, they don't have a tight end that they can rely upon. Cameron Brate's still there, but he's been so-so, and he's been a role player, like a backup role player for the last several years. And well, where's Rob Gronkowski? Where exactly has he been? Oh yeah, that's right. The last time we saw him, he was on the Kids' Choice Awards with Miranda Cosgrove. Yes, from iCarly, getting slimed on 1,000 times. Yes, green slime with Miranda 1,000 times. So while Rob Gronkowski is deciding his future, he's also on the Kids' Choice Awards on national television with Miranda Cosgrove, getting green goo all over. I'm sorry. So the Bucs could definitely use a younger tight end, maybe a more durable tight end. I know Brady and Gronk are buddies, but maybe it's just time. Maybe it's just time to a little change of scenery. So pretty much that's what they need. A guard, tight end, and maybe some defensive linemen to offset the lack of re-signings of Jason Pierre-Paul and Ndamukong Suh. So the Bucs, it's more just so about retooling and adding more depth. And back to the Packers at number 28. By this point, they should have already drafted their top receiver, their supposed top receiver. But whether or not they did, they also have to address the offensive line because, well, there are a lot of question marks around that offensive line. Starters Billy Turner, Lucas Patrick are gone. Right tackle Elgin Jenkins will miss most of the regular season, recovering from knee surgery. So the Packers are going to have to look at some help. They're going to have to look at this late portion of the first round, see who they can add, and then use the rest of the draft to add some help, add some depth pieces on the offensive line. So, please. So, back-to-back, number 29 and 30, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, who were so close to returning to their third trip to the Super Bowl, and they actually managed to overcome a little bit the Super Bowl loser's curse. So, the Chiefs underwent a mid-season struggle. Many people thought they were going to endure the Super Bowl loser's curse, but they managed to rally back. Patrick Mahomes was back to playing at an elite level, but when it came to the AFC Championship game, against the Cincinnati Bengals, they just made one mistake too many from Mahomes, and then Andy Reid played too conservatively, coached too conservatively, mind you, and their defense went back to being the defense of old, and it prevented them from making a third straight trip back to the Super Bowl in that AFC title game loss. Pretty dreadful, if you ask me. But fortunately for Kansas City, they have about 12 picks in this draft, primarily because they traded away Tyreek Hill. I guess because of the big ass money that they would have shelled out for him. But anyway, excuse me, they have a lot of needs to address. The biggest need that they need to address is wide receiver. Who's going to be the number one receiver in this offense now that Tyreek Hill is gone? Is it going to be Marquez Valdes-Scantling? I mean, we've already seen what he's done in Green Bay. It's nothing special. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's more of a receiver 3, middling receiver 2. They still lack a true top receiver to replace Tyreek. In either 29 or 30, you have back-to-back picks, unless you're going to trade down from one of them to make a decision on who that receiver is. And again, plenty of receivers to pick from this late in the first round. They're also going to need a new starting corner because, well, my 49ers took away Charvarius Ward. But seriously, they need to value this position. They have, many picks to go out, get some corners that can play defense and not get their asses roasted in the title game to Joe Burrow or even Josh Allen for that matter. They need to seriously value this position so much more to make Mahomes' life so much more relaxing on both sides, on the offensive side of the ball. So when it comes to the safety position, you got to find a replacement, at least a reserve behind, I forgot what his name was, from the Houston Texans. They signed a safety from the Houston Texans, but I don't know how you'll do long term, but maybe find a pet project safety that can replace that could be a true replacement for Tyrann Mathieu, and maybe another additional starter opposite Frank Clark on the edge. So for Kansas City, a lot of work to do, but the main focus should be finding that replacement for Tyreek Hill. Then at number 31, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, the AFC champion and Super Bowl runner-up, who exceeded all expectations in 2021, going to the Super Bowl. That was despite the lingering issue of a terrible, terrible offensive line. And that came back to haunt them, unfortunately, as Joe Burrow had pretty much nowhere to go against the LA Rams' vaunted defensive line, and they just came just a little bit short of their first ever championship for Cincinnati. Now, fortunately for Joe Burrow, the Bengals already went out and addressed most of the offensive line in the offseason, so good for them. But now it's time to address the rest of the offensive line, and you have about 8 picks to do it, so even better, I guess. So the Bengals, you have to address the center position because that's something that you have yet to fill. So from there, maybe you could do it in this pick or maybe one in day 2. The offensive line position is pretty loaded, if you ask me. Their draft picks from there, though, they have to fill their needs mainly at corner and safety after the offensive line, because they're lacking a starter in the corner position, and in the safety position you have Jesse Bates, but he's under the franchise tag. But behind Jesse Bates, you lack depth behind the 2 starters at those respective positions that are on expiring deals. So for Cincinnati, you have to prioritize corner and safety along with the center position. You also lost CJ Uzomah in free agency, so maybe you do find a tight end, maybe in the later rounds. And then we're back to the Detroit Lions, all the way from 2 to 32. So 30 picks later, we're back to Detroit. It's pretty late in this draft cycle. They're the last pick in round 1. So what do you do from here? What do you do from this point? Well, depending on what Detroit did, they probably addressed edge rusher by getting Kayvon Thibodeau. So it's pretty much up to them what they want to do. Do they want to address the top need? Do they want to trade down? What do they do? If they want to trade down, hopefully it's a good price. Or do they want to trade out? Whatever. But if they want to stay there, they have some other needs to address: safety, linebacker, receiver. Like I mentioned, I think receiver would be the best option here, because they need someone to go opposite Amon-Ra St. Brown until he can prove that his rookie year was no fluke. So it's all a matter of what they want to prioritize, or if they want to trade out for more picks for the next year. So that was pretty much every pick in the first round. Finally, multiple teams have multiple first round picks, and a lot of all these teams that I talked about have a lot of pressing needs, more than I imagined. And that was just the teams in the first round. There are 8 teams that we're going to discuss right now that have absolutely no first round pick, unless if they somehow trade up into the first round to get someone that they absolutely want. Starting with Bears football, Maggle. So that was pretty much the theme of 2021 for the Chicago Bears. 5-12 because of the mediocrity of Bears football. I know I can't do it right now. I can't do that Slag Daddy impersonation because of my allergy battle. But anyway, everyone played their brand of Bears football in 2021. What I mean by Bears football is pretty much shitty, bad offensive line play, bad defense, no help for Justin Fields in 2021. And that led to general manager Ryan Pace and head coach Matt Nagy getting shown the door and getting fired. And you bring in Matt Eberflus from the Indianapolis Colts and whatever his name was as general manager. And I gotta say, this new regime hasn't really done much yet to get Justin Fields some help, especially in terms of the offensive line. So the Bears don't actually have that many picks this year. They only have 5, so they have to use them wisely. They have to use them effectively. They have their first pick in the second round. So for the Bears, their first pick has to be an offensive lineman, or maybe a wide receiver. Who knows? But either way, the offensive line has to be a priority in this draft, because do the Bears really want to go through another year where Justin Fields is going to get sacked nearly the most amount of times in the league? That's just the wide receiver, not just the offensive line position. It's the receiver position too. Who is Justin Fields going to throw to? All he has is Darnell Mooney. I mean, he's pretty solid. He also has Byron Pringle, but he was just the third option in Kansas City. And Amon-Ra St. Brown's brother, and Manny Quinius. I can't even say that correctly. Did I mention that Justin Fields still needs protection? He does, because he does. So Bears mainly have concerns at the offensive side of the ball. Yes, even in 2022. Another team that doesn't have a first round pick is the Denver Broncos, but for a team that just traded Russell Wilson after a season where they were going through a influx of Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, I wouldn't be worried so much of them not having a first round pick. In what's even better for the Denver Broncos is that they have 8 picks total, and they can pretty much use them all to retool the defensive side of the ball. Yes, you can go out and get another tackle for Russell Wilson, add some depth at that position, but this draft mainly should be used just to refine and retool, add some pieces to the defensive side of the ball, because you have an offensive line that's already pretty solid. You already have the pieces in place at receiver. I mean, yes, they're not proven yet with Russell Wilson under center, with Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, in the running back tandem of Melvin Gordon, who just re-signed to Denver, and Javonte Williams. So yes, the offense is still kind of unproven yet with Russell Wilson, but you don't really necessarily have to make some picks related to the offensive side of the ball besides tackle and maybe tight end, but the defensive side of the ball could get some additions and fine-tuning, because they traded away Shelby Harris. I forgot when, but they need to draft his replacement, even with the signing of defensive tackle DJ Jones at free agency. So they still need some parts on the defensive line, maybe some additions at the linebacker spot. So for Denver, it's not that bad. Honestly, it's not that bad for them, not having a first round pick. But what is bad is the Cleveland Browns, because for the Browns, even after a disappointing follow-up to their 2020 playoff run, which saw them underperform with an injured Baker Mayfield, they went out and got up Deshaun Watson for a boatload of picks and gave him the most massive contract in NFL history, despite having a shit ton of allegations still left to resolve. Like, holy fuck. They only have 5 picks in this draft, and you have honestly a lot of issues on the defensive line and at the receiver position, and 5 picks is not enough to resolve that. So the Browns, yes, they have their QB, regardless of the shit Watson's going to be in. But now Watson's pretty much walking into the same situation like he was in Houston. Yes, they have Amari Cooper, but then they went backwards and released Jarvis Landry. So besides Amari Cooper, who is Watson going to throw to? Like, who do they have? Like, reliable? Who's going to be the number 2 option in Cleveland for Watson? They also need some help for Myles Garrett on the defensive line, because Jadeveon Clowney has not re-signed yet. They haven't given him an offer to re-sign. So for Cleveland, for as great as this Deshaun Watson signing has been for them, I mean, even with the controversy surrounding it, well, you have some holes to fix. You really have some holes to fix. For the Miami Dolphins, it's their 2021. They went 9-8. This is after a 1-7 start. They went 8-8 the rest of the way. Brian Flores was ousted as head coach, partly because of fighting with the front office and the locker room, and mainly over Tua Tagovailoa. And in came in former 49ers offensive coordinator Mike McDaniel. And he, right away, clearly has a trust in Tua. And to show that trust in Tua Tagovailoa right away, they went out, got some key pieces for the offensive line in Connor Williams and Teron Armstead. And most importantly, they made a big splash by trading for Tyreek Hill to pair up with Jalen Waddle. Like, holy hell. Like, the Dolphins, are serious. They're serious in competing for the AFC East, even though Josh Allen is still pretty much there. So Dolphins, consequently, they only have 4 picks in this draft because of that Tyreek Hill trade. And they still kind of have some issues to resolve. Tua has to prove that he's worthy to start for the Dolphins. But when it comes to this draft, they still need a center and another tackle to fill up that offensive line. You kind of also need a running back because, yes, Raheem Mostert is a solid running back, but he's had multiple injuries in the last 2 years with San Francisco. And Myles Gaskin, yeah, he sucks. He absolutely sucks. So they need a reliable and healthy running back. And fortunately these days, you can get one in day 3 of the draft. You can find a reliable starting running back in day 3 of the draft. Just ask the 49ers. Literally, just ask the 49ers how that's going. So the main focus though should be beefing up, finalizing that offensive line, who's going to be starting. And I know they don't have a first round pick, but second, third round, plenty of people to pick from. The Indianapolis Colts, man, they would have had a first round pick if Carson Wentz didn't play more games. And speaking of Carson Wentz, that experiment turned out to be a disaster for them because, yeah, he completely fucked up in the final 2 weeks of the season. And it wasn't entirely Carson Wentz's fault, but he didn't do anything to help out the other team's issues to clinch a playoff spot that was so easily attainable. Win and get in, and you fuck that up, especially against the all-elite Jaguars. So you move on from Carson Wentz, you trade him away. Now you have Matt Ryan and his fat-ass contract from Atlanta. And then you go into this draft. Now your main focus should be supplying Matt Ryan with help, both up front and out. What I mean by out, wide receivers, of course. First, with the offensive line, you need a left tackle that can actually block and protect Matt Ryan, because you haven't gotten out of that with Eric Fisher and Matt Pryor. So for the Colts, you have to protect Matt Ryan both on the left tackle spot and a guard position on the right side to protect Matt Ryan's blind side. Indy could also find itself a running mate opposite Michael Pittman Jr. Actually, they seriously need to, because, well, I mean, that's your only option. They don't have anyone else. So offensive line and wide receiver are pretty much your main concerns if you're the Indianapolis Colts. The Las Vegas Raiders, 10-7 in 2021. Despite all the drama that they went through, still made the playoffs on a last-second field goal against the LA Chargers. And they almost beat the Cincinnati Bengals. They almost did. And Rich Bisaccia, big part of that crazy run. But unfortunately, they didn't keep him, and they went on to hire Josh McDaniels of the New England Patriots. And they made a big splash too in free agency by trading for Packers receiver Devontae Adams to pair with Derek Carr and Hunter Renfrow in the offense. And I don't know why like this has been picking up in the last couple of days, but the Packers have been like intrigued in getting Darren Waller in a trade. Like, why? They have Robert Tonyan. Maybe because Robert Tonyan is like not what they panned out to be, but I don't know how the Packers would even be able to afford Darren Waller and the contract that he could potentially get. So I don't know how that's going to work out. So the Raiders don't have many picks. They only have 5 picks. And I know they're hosting the draft this year, but well, I guess, I don't know, I'll say the Raiders fans will show up somewhere. So the Raiders, they need to prioritize a couple things. The tackle spot, safety, and corner. They should be able to find some help in the weekend portion of the draft, but it's going to be on the new regime to execute and find good help in those top needs. They still need an offensive line to help Derek Carr stay upright, because right tackle Alex Leatherwood, who was drafted under the John Gruden regime, he continues to struggle whether he plays right tackle or right guard, whatever he's shifting from. He struggles at that position. He's a bust. So perhaps they address that with their first pick in day 2. Then they can go forward in addressing some help at safety and corner, because, Casey Hayward's in Atlanta now, but they need help getting at least a good starter or a good person that won't frequently lapse in coverage that much, especially at the safety spot. So for the Raiders, yes, you got Devontae Adams. You get an explosive weapon to pair alongside Hunter Renfrow and Zach Moss, and that his name, the other receiver. But either way, you have to support your offense with your defense as well. So the Raiders have some work to do, even if they're hosting the draft. Now for my San Francisco 49ers. They made the playoffs, 10-7, 6th seed at the NFC wild card. And surprisingly, they made it as far as the NFC Championship game, in spite of the limitations of Jimmy G and the secondary. But fortunately, those limitations came back to bite them in the ass, and they were leading, but they eventually lost that game to the LA Rams. For the Niners, it was pretty much a pretty quiet offseason until recently. They didn't get that many free agent signings. Their only notable one was, like I said, Charvarius Ward in free agency from Kansas City. And then suddenly things started picking up when Deebo Samuel was, stirring the pot a little bit with the contract negotiations and how that's going, or the lack thereof. And then just last week, he requested a trade. Like I mentioned in the last episode, he requested a trade, and I went on a tangent about like he has to decide what he wants. What does Deebo Samuel want? And how the 49ers eventually have leverage over him. So for the 49ers, they have 9 picks. They have 9 picks in this draft, mainly thanks to the compensatory picks of everyone leaving, all the coaches that left in the years that followed. So if Mike McDaniel and Robert Saleh didn't leave, well, we would have even fewer picks. So I guess you can say thank you for leaving. So for the 49ers, you have some things to address. It's not just finding a potential replacement for Deebo at receiver. You need more corners. You need more edge rushers. You need a center. So I could probably list a lot more. There's probably even more than that. So the 49ers, they have plenty of picks to address a number of their needs, even with the lack of a first-round pick from the Trey Lance trade last year. But grabbing an edge rusher to complement Nick Bosa would be important, because Nick Bosa needs a running mate. You don't have Arden Key anymore. You don't have DJ Jones. You need some help in the pass rush now. especially on the exterior edge, to help Nick Bosa out. And then in the center position, there's been like conflicting rumblings that center Alex Mack may or may not like play in 2022. So regardless of what his decision is, you have to find a center. You have to find a center in day 2 or 3 of the draft that can stay healthy, that's young, and can be a big help in the offensive line. And obviously the big thing is finding a receiver to, potentially replace Debo. That probably is on the top of 49ers to-do list. And, who knows if Debo gets traded on draft day or not. If he does, then, we'll probably get at least some form of return back, maybe some first round picks, like a first round pick or two. But if he doesn't, then, we'll see what happens from there. And then the last team on our preview for this episode is the LA Rams, the Super Bowl champions, who won't pick until the 3rd round. But they still have a bevy of picks. Again, made that gamble to get Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford and shipping off Jared Goff. And yes, there were ups and downs, but it paid off in the end with the Super Bowl championship, Cooper Kupp, the MVP of the team. And for the Rams, obviously the big question is, how do you follow that up? How do you repeat? Aaron Donald's coming back, but then you lose a couple of key players in free agency, like the guard Austin Corbett, corner Darius Williams, and then of course your midseason acquisition Von Miller, who went to the Bills. So for the Rams, how do you repeat? How do you continue to build upon your success in 2021? I mean, besides adding Allen Robinson to potentially replace Odell Beckham Jr., because they don't know when Odell is actually going to be available, even if they do re-sign him, because he's still a free agent, but they don't know if he's going to be healthy and if it's worth to sign him onto a contract. And their longtime tackle Andrew Whitworth retired literally a month ago. So the Rams don't pick until the 3rd round. They have to address the guard position. They have to address the tackle position. They need a linebacker. They can also use a corner after losing Darius Williams, edge rusher. So the Rams, for as great as for them as they won the Super Bowl, they can't address anything until the 3rd round. So whatever they want to address from there, I mean, they have 7 picks, but they have to address them wisely. And who knows if they make it to the final roster, because they don't always they don't always do. So that was all 32 teams in this NFL draft. My throat is killing me. My nose is clogged, but we managed to preview all 32 teams and their draft needs going into this NFL draft coming very shortly, and as well as those prospects I scouted in this year's draft. But what are you anticipating for the NFL draft in Las Vegas? The stage looks pretty cool, by the way, how they're doing it, how they conceptualized it back in 2020 before the pandemic ruined everything. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about how this NFL draft will pan out. Who's going number 1? Who's going number 262? Who's going to be Mr. Irrelevant? Who's going to be the biggest steal, the biggest reach? What do you expect for your team in this NFL draft? Who do you think they will pick? What's their biggest need? Let me know. Send me a DM, comment on the YouTube page, anywhere that DylanLasagna, Very Cold Lasagna as well, is available. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. I really love to hear your thoughts. But that's it for this big, filthy casual preview to the 2022 NFL Draft and this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I am your host, DylanLasagna. Thank you for tuning in to this big, fat episode. It was very long. It was very, very long, but I'm glad you stuck around if you made it this far. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into this fine episode. Keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports. Make sure you listen to the show wherever you can and however you can on your favorite listening platform. And until the name gets called, until all the names get called after the draft, peace out.